Okay.
I just always think about how when I first wrote Breaking Up with Sugar, I was dead lying about about my eating through my bariatric surgery. It's so much shame about it. So much shame about it. I, and so I didn't actually put it in.
Yeah.
And a friend's dad read the treatment and he was like, he literally wrote in the thing, like, you're lying about, there's something missing in this story, he said. And then I put down the book for 3 years. And the interesting thing, and this is
3 years.
Yeah, I stopped writing it for 3 years. I was like, I'm just going to go to my
3
grave
years.
with this. Secrets keep us so sick.
That's right.
And
They do.
And then the point of why we're having people who have been on this journey on the podcast is because one of the most amazing parts of writing Breaking Up with Sugar is the amount of email and direct messages I get where people say, thank you so much for sharing that part of the story. Like, I thought I was alone in this.
I know.
So welcome.
And it's kind of divine intervention that he said that. Thank you. I appreciate it, Molly. It's great to be here.
Everything's divine intervention if you look for it. You know what I mean?
That's exactly right.
Enough about me. Let's talk about you.
Nothing's an accident.
Okay. Enough about me. Let's talk about you. So listen, how long have you been broken up with sugar?
Well, February 29th, which was leap year last year. So wow, February 9th, so about a year and a half.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Tell me a little bit about
it's.
I come from a 12-step perspective. That's how I was initially raised. So I always like to think about what happened, what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. Can you talk with me a little bit about where you were before all of this? Take us to 5 years ago. What was your life like? Just tell me everything.
Yes. Okay, I will. So 5 years ago, I was deep in the sugar. That's the truth of it. And I always knew, I've literally referred to myself as the sugar girl my whole life. Everyone that knows me and loves me knows I'm the sugar girl. It was kind of more of a family joke, a friend joke. It hurt a little bit sometimes, even though I was often the one making the joke. But I ate so much sugar in so many different ways. It was almost unreal when some of the many diets that I went on throughout the years, you would keep track, of what sugar you'd eaten during the day. And it was
macros,
truly a miracle
you would take your grams down.
Well, I've done it all, Molly. Let me just tell you, I have met with therapists, nutritionists. I have done every diet and program there is in the entire world. And I'd even given up sugar a couple times because the program required it. Oh. But as soon as that program ended, I was knee deep right back in. And
wait, can I ask a question?
Didn't understand then.
I just want to ask a question.
Yes,
wait, Tio.
Please.
So here's just Tio, Alex, Wilt, Tio. Talk slower.
Okay.
There's nothing to be nervous
Okay, thank
about.
you. And I do tend to, tend to
I'm
talk
the quickest
fast.
talker.
Okay.
This is chill. Okay. We're just out to lunch, having the most delicious Breaking Up with Sugar salads. We're having a convo. Okay. All is well. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. There's nothing wrong. Because I think there's a lot of what you're saying that I want to try to dive into, and we have to talk slower for me to get that.
Okay.
Wait, so when you say you've been on,
okay.
So when you say you've been on every diet,
every program,
what are the top 3 craziest things that you've done in the pursuit of, what are you in the pursuit of? Weight loss? Is that how it was body for you?
Well, that's a good question. Honestly, for me, I always knew kind of in the depths of my soul, this sugar thing was the problem for health, for all of it. But it also did cause the weight to creep up. There's no doubt about it, that it was always a diet to lose that ethereal 10 or 15 pounds, which creeped up to be 20, 25, over the years as I got older. And the thing is that some of the craziest things I've done is my husband and I did a beach body 21-day cleanse once, where I'm not kidding when I say we barely ate. I mean, he started looking gaunt. I was concerned. And I did all this stuff. But, the second these things are over, that's the weird part. That's what a diet is. And that's what I've come to understand through you is I didn't get that I kept thinking, oh, they all have the transition plan, right? They say, oh, don't worry. When you get to the end of our program, we'll transition you back. Well, transition means, again, new understanding of the sugar addiction model. As soon as I have the first brownie, it's over. So it's not a matter of trying to follow their transition program. For me, it is about when sugar enters my body again, I need more of it. I try to bargain and deal and say, well, they only want you to have this, and those transition programs never worked. And now I understand why. And I always beat myself up, like, what is wrong with you? Why can't you do this?
Yeah.
Those kind of negative thoughts.
When you say it's all over, like when I eat a brownie, it's all over. Like I always have this thought, like I'm sober, I don't drink alcohol. And so, it's like if I've had like accidental sips of things in my life, and it's not like I just go like gangbusters on alcohol, but
Right.
I do know that actually when I've had those accidental sips, it's actually the mind. So when you say it's all over, can you talk me through like what it feels like for you?
Well, it's back to being so talking about my eating kind of for the not just the last 5 years, but my whole life. It's always been, I've wanted the sugar. So that's what I desire. So when I go out to dinner, I'll just kind of get through my meal. I don't really care too much about regular food. I just wanted to get to the dessert. So that was part of the problem, is that if you're just looking for the sweet, if you're hoping for the cookie after the lunch, if you're hoping for the dessert after the dinner or the afternoon snack, the problem with that is that you're not even enjoying or even knowing the food you're eating. The food was never really my issue as much as it was the sugar treats. So getting back to when I say once I've had the brownie, I'm just using that as a very one example of many sugar items I would inhale when a diet was over.
Right.
When I would have that, I knew it was over because it started back that, well, that tastes a lot better to me and is familiar to me and is all the things basically to me, and I want that more. So then the next day I was having it just started the Danish for breakfast. It just never went more than honestly 2 to 7 days before I was right back to the exact same habits I had prior to the diet. And as we all know, the weight is on literally in 7 to 14 days that you've worked a month to get off.
Yeah.
And it feels very disheartening. Why
Talk
did I
me
bother to do all that what felt like hard work?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and by the way, is hard. Like I think going on a restrictive diet is like super, it actually makes me want to take a nap. Like thinking about that beach body thing that you and your, like
I
I literally am
know.
like, you know what? I'm just going to go to sleep instead.
No, it's
um,
exhausting. It really is.
Talk me through a little bit about what your relationship with food was like before February of 2020, and take
Mhm.
me back, like, people, I've done this for so long, but there's different people that like some people it starts in childhood, some people it starts after they have children. Like
Mhm.
where does the sort of break up with your,
Story start.
yeah, where does it all start?
Mhm. Well, I grew up on Captain Crunch and Pop Tarts. So let's
Oh,
start there. So all my
Captain
childhood, my mom
Crunch,
just didn't know. Captain Crunch, Apple Jacks, those kind of things.
cinnamon
I had ice
toast
cream every
crunch
night
over
with my
here,
dad.
cinnamon toast crunch
Ex-
all day, every day.
all of it.
Mm-hmm.
So pretty much it was all I ever knew. And what I think looking back now that happened is my palate was just used to sugary things. Therefore, it was really hard to eat, a pork chop and think that that tasted good because I enjoyed so many sugary things. So I will say this, I didn't really believe it was a problem my whole life until I got to like maybe my 30s.
Oh.
And then it started to become very clear that this was a problem.
Hmm.
Now, when I told this to my husband, he said, Kirsten, you've been addicted to sugar for as long as I've known you. And that was when I was 18 years old. So clearly, I didn't think it was a problem. I think others felt it was a problem. And,
Wow.
and were really wowed by what I was able to
So when you say
consume
it
when
was
it
a
came to sugar.
problem,
So
like,
that's kind of, yeah.
yeah, talk me through, like, so when you say, so I love that, because I love that moment where we sort of lose our blind spots and we're like, oh wow. So
Hmm.
it sounds like it was really from the beginning that you had this sort of obsessional idea
Yes.
with food, but where did it
Hmm.
move from
Yes.
fun to fun with consequences to consequences,
Right. Well, I have 3 children, and those were I call them the baby years. So during the baby years, many of moms like me would have the first baby, try to lose the weight, have the second baby, try to lose the weight. And that's when I started the diet world.
Mm.
My first Weight Watchers bout was after I had my first child. And honestly, I had never, quote, dieted before. So that was where this journey, I think, got a little sticky. And so then I was all about losing. I mean, literally back then it might have been 5 to 10 pounds, but I became obsessive, trying to follow the program, failing, all the things we all do, whether it's 30, 50, or 100 pounds, it's the same concept. And then as time went on, lots of things happened in my life that were difficult during the late 30s, early 40s. And during those things, I turned to sugar, ate more of it, more weight came on. I tried harder. I saw more dietitians. I did more programs. It became an obsession, and all my energy went to trying to figure this out. And I wouldn't say trying to give up sugar. It truly was dieting back then. And I understand, thankfully, from you about this diet mentality. It never dawned on me that I was falling prey to this diet mentality.
Yeah.
And that now my
it's
whole
such a
life
trap.
was about,
Well,
I
it's a
had no
very
idea.
well, I've been,
But
obviously, I think about this all day. It's such a well marketed trap because that's so marketed in you're not enough. It's not enough. And then if you are enough, what you're saying, I love what you're saying, like there's no transition plan out. So then you just have to, it's like a good casino in a lot of ways.
It is. And remember I forget who was on, it might've just been your most recent podcast, when they talked about how you just get a little bit of a win. It's like the slot machine. You get enough of a win. So you do a diet, you lose 6 pounds and you think this works. I'm so excited. And I'm so proud of myself. And then being proud of myself started being about whether I was accomplishing the current plan I was on, which, let's face it, that's a recipe for failure. And my friends and I used to say we just lied to ourselves so many times we didn't believe ourselves anymore. That's what happened.
Totally.
I didn't believe anything would work anymore.
So you lost that relationship with yourself in that. So take me to your 30s where you have this like aha moment where you're like, this is a problem. Like, because when you're saying that, it's a very interesting story because you're saying like, you didn't just think that something was wrong and you just went on the bikini boot camp plan. You thought something was wrong and you went to a therapist. It sounds like you actually went to some qualified professionals. So talk us through like where you got lost, like what was happening for you.
Well, Molly, what's so interesting is no one until your book came out ever had even introduced the concept of addiction. And to be honest, it took me a year into breaking up with sugar to even understand that I could call this addiction, because I want to say to you and to everyone out there, I know people that struggle with alcohol and drugs and other addictions, and it made me feel less that it wasn't right for me to say sugar is an addiction, because I like to eat a lot of cupcakes. I did a lot of brushing it off, like, oh, please, you just like sugar.
So was it like,
and the truth is, it's
Kirsten,
an
was
addiction.
was it like comparative suffering? Were you saying like, I'm not worthy of calling, like you were in a lot of pain and you felt like I wasn't worthy of calling this an addiction. Can you say more about that?
Right. And sometimes sometimes I thought about it and would say it out loud to friends and family. And I think society as a whole, to be honest with you, this is sort of coming up and out, thank goodness now, but I'm 53. So 20 some years ago, people just said, oh, you just like, and it's not only, it's validated. Everyone would say, please have your cupcakes. That's not going to hurt you. And no matter who I tried to talk to about it, even really good therapists and dietitians, I can bring up intuitive eating because we've all talked about it in this community. I was walked through intuitive eating for a year, and again, in tears every week, wondering, why can't I do this? I'm trying to do this, and I was trying to be a striver. I'm going to try harder. I'm going to do better. I'm going to take notes. I'm going to pray every night. I'm going to journal. I did it all. But unfortunately, the result was the same, which was while I was eating sugar, I was still going to keep eating sugar. And that's what's made me understand when a person who's an alcoholic has a beer, unfortunately, that then means I would like another beer. And I now can relate to that and own my truth, even though it felt a little, I was raised by a mom who said, people have it worse than you, sweetie, my whole life. Wow. And they do sometimes, yes. But I learned through therapy, you have to validate your own struggles as well as caring about other people's struggles, even if theirs are way worse in certain situations.
Well, and it's about showing up whole, isn't it? Like, even if your problems are not as bad as others, we still need to heal ourselves so that we can show up whole and be like the best versions
for
of
others.
ourselves. I mean, that's always what I think of when I'm always I'm pretty healthy, but I'm always doing my work so that I can show up whole. And I think you're doing the same. I have to say, when you were talking about the intuitive eating, and I almost wanted to cry. It's, I so
It
relate to
kind of
that.
breaks my heart a little too.
I know. Cause when you're on the other side and like it,
It
and
really,
again, like in my experience, I've seen a lot of people it work for. And I think that was also the problem for me when I tried. I was like, there's something, and that
right.
and diet culture
What's
bred
wrong
that
with
into
me?
me. Yeah. And trauma bred that
Mhm.
into me. Like what's wrong?
It
There's
does.
something wrong with
Hmm.
me, when it's just like biodiversity, and some
Exactly.
things work for some people and some things work for other people.
And during those years of 30s and early 40s, I had some pregnancy, and then my youngest child had some health struggles. And so during all this time of kind of crisis, if you will, my go-to was sugar. And I didn't really look at it like, oh, I'm stressed, I'm going to go run and eat a candy bar. It truly was so integrated in my life, into every single moment, every meal, every hour, it just wasn't even something anyone really thought about or noticed, including myself, because it's something I had been doing for so long. And then when things got tough, I think it just kind of became worse. And then the only time that I really, to be honest, woke up a little when we were talking about these 30s and 40s was as my children grew up, and I found that they didn't need me to be in their, everybody's either gone or a teenager or moving on. I started really taking a harder look at what is going on here, with myself. It's sort of like you come up and out of momhood, and now it's about me again. And
Yeah.
I was really feeling like if I don't do something about this, my health is going to deteriorate. I was just feeling like any day now they're going to tell me I'm pre-diabetic. How could it not be the case?
Huh.
So in preparation for getting older, I'm in my 50s now, and for all those things, I was really looking for that final thing. You know how some of the diets call it a lifestyle instead of a diet. So I was
I mean,
looking
I
for
do
a
sometimes, in
lifestyle.
fairness. So do I.
Yeah, and this is a lifestyle. I will say it's hard to know the language. I think you do a really good job of explaining why this isn't a diet, but I do understand why people struggle with the difference when I've been on 30 of them. I understand why the concept is hard, but it is different. This
Well,
is
yeah.
different.
And it's about
These are loving
perspective.
boundaries. Yes.
Say
And
more.
like you said, a lot of people can do intuitive eating, and that's great. And I'm thrilled for those that can do it. But like you said, that made me feel worse. And I live in a town here in the suburbs of Chicago where many women are, this is their world, is making sure, and again, no judgment, it's just making sure they're in shape and eating healthy and salad with dressing on the side. And spending 20 years in that world, I think just made things even harder. Why can't I do that? What's wrong with me? How many times am I going to try and fail? All those feelings, and then they build on each other, and eventually you just don't think anything's going to help.
I
So
have a question
fast
about,
forward to finding breaking up with sugar.
yeah, I want to just I just have a quick question about something
Mhm.
you just said,
Yes.
because I come from 325 pounds, right? And I was like a really heavy, like
Hmm.
7-year-old. And so a lot of my life has been about
Hmm.
everybody being worried. Like I remember when I was really topping the scales and I was with my best friends in Grand Central Station, and my friends like, and I couldn't walk, so so I was so,
Oh,
I couldn't
yeah.
catch my breath in Grand Central Station. We were walking around, and like my best friend was like, I'm
Hmm.
really worried about you. I mean, a lot of my life was about dealing with
Hmm.
people's worries. And as I listened to your story,
Hmm.
it sounds like it was very much, and like that comes with its own problems, but I do think there is something about
Hmm.
this 5 to 25 pounds that's like very dismissed. And I'm hearing that in your story. Like everyone's like, oh, come on, you
Hmm.
look good. It's a cupcake. And you're sort of like,
Hmm.
I'm dying. Like this
Exactly.
is, can you
This is a
talk me
problem.
through that? Like talk me
Hmm.
through your soul there.
Yes. Well, and Molly, I'm glad you asked about that, because I kind of feel like I am so many people out there, meaning you almost feel like you don't have a problem. You think, well, this is silly. There are people that have, I mentioned that before about the alcoholism and the drug addiction. But even when it comes to weight, I was never validated. And honestly, not that I expect people to feel so sorry for me because I weigh 25 pounds extra than I should. That's not the point. The point is, it's really hard to be heard. It's hard for people to understand my inside struggles. When I try to share them, they do a lot of, it's fine, don't worry. And in a sense, it was fine, which is probably why it went on so long, because it's kind of that borderline, I'm dying on the inside, but on the outside, I mean, no one's really going to say, wow, you've got to do something about this.
Well,
There's no intervention coming. It's all in my head,
that is like,
and so
I want to scream from the roof. Like, that is diet culture
I
at
know
its worst. Basically, because you like, look what
it is.
society says is okay. You can't be struggling with an
Right.
addiction internally. Like, it literally makes my head want to fall off
I
and
know,
like
it
cry.
stinks.
I'm having just so many feelings. I might need you to have therapy with me right now, basically. Like, I'm just having so many feelings.
So many feelings. Well, and what's interesting is I've learned through this past year and a half how many people are like me. And now I look out into the world and see so many people. I don't want to diagnose everyone and say, oh, you're just like me. But America is addicted to sugar, in my opinion. And I think that there are a lot of us that are under 25 pounds overweight in a 5 to 25 pound. The weight isn't always the only telling thing.
Yeah.
There are so many signs and symptoms, but if you're addicted to sugar, it's about the freedom. My mind was a constant. I had this conversation. I remember a Weight Watchers coach once saying to me, which I loved, you're losing the fight with yourself in your head. You're battling back and forth and you lost. I know, bam. And I was, I can't, bargaining, debating, making plans on Wednesday. So there isn't anything I didn't try. And I didn't understand why it wouldn't work. And I think so many people would benefit from just seeing. One of the things I've heard either you or in the books, you personally or in the book say is try giving up whatever you think might be holding you back and see how you feel. Because you don't know, boy, it took me about 5 or 6 months to really separate from sugar. And when I did, I'm in a whole new world. The
Talk us
66
through
days
that.
was amazing.
Talk us through
Yes.
that.
Okay.
Talk us through
All
that.
right.
So like, what made you decide that, like, I mean, especially like, can I just say, this is really how, why I dedicated the book to the reader. Cause I just think like anybody who picks up a book after diet drama and trauma, it's like,
I know.
I feel such a responsibility giving you this book. Thank you. 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 So what even made you decide to like pick up that book? Like talk me through that and then give it up. And then the 5 months and does it feel like it does today? Like it
I
first did.
know.
Talk me through the whole thing.
Right. Okay, so first of all, I literally read about it in an article I was reading, and I raced to the bookstore because even the little blurb on it resonated with me, because the words you used of like breaking up with sugar, I thought, I need to break up with sugar. That's exactly what I need to do. Then when I started reading, it had so many funny laughs about comparing it to a bad boyfriend. He's at the door. He's brought flowers. He's being so kind. Take him back. The cupcakes at the door. I really laughed out loud at a few of those, and it made me resonate. This is what I do. I let it go for a little while, maybe a week, 2 weeks. I'm right back because he's so, draws me back in. I used to kind of say, like, if there was a candy bar in the closet, it would kind of sing to me. Like I knew it was in there. I thought about it. I walked around the house going, no, you don't need. And that I had to try to keep things, all of that. It's just all part of addiction. People don't walk around feeling that way if they are not addicted to something, that the candy bar is just in the closet. No, it's neutral. That's how I feel now. So going back to the book, I raced to the bookstore. I read the entire thing in 24 hours, marking up every page and putting sticky notes and taking notes. And I was on my way to visit my daughter in London. And of course, we all know it's that I'll start Monday, I'll start, Thursday. So I did much more than most people because I bought the book in January and read it. Didn't start till February 29th because went on that trip, came back, planned to start Monday, planned to start Wednesday. And I want to say that because so many of us do that. And we're in the habit of doing that because I just thought, well, okay, I'm just going to do this because I have this weekend. Okay, I'm just going to. So it took me a few weeks to really jump aboard. But now I understand if you plan and get through that first 3 to 6 days, you're kind of in. But I had a struggle getting there. So once I started February 29th,
do you have any, hold on. Do you have
yes.
because I think, actually, I always think that grace is so fascinating, like the thing that gets us in.
Yes.
Do you have any idea how it was that because I don't know, probably even in storage, I have 100 diet books that I bought with, by the way, the most earnest to work, right? Like everything in me was like, yes, this is going to happen.
Yes.
What was the thing that made you start? Do you know?
Well, I do know what the kind of final blow was. And it was because when I was in London, my daughter has had to be sugar-free for years for some health issues. And I was unable to be with her and not eat sugar in front of her when I was in London. And believe me, I've done that before for years. And it's so shaming to think that I can't even have a lunch or a dinner or a day in London with her and not. I was doing crazy things like running around to the different bakeries, and I won't even go into all the
go into it. Go into it. It heals us.
Okay.
Go into it.
Well, there's a place there called Bread Ahead. And my sister and I, no exaggerating, walked about, an hour and 40 minutes to get to Bread Ahead in the rain so we could get our gingerbread cake and our croissants. And I was there a couple of weeks, and I went, I don't know how many times. It became obvious to me. I already knew this, but even more, you have a problem. This is not normal. You need to be able to decide for yourself. Like my rational mind couldn't say, that doesn't make sense, Kirsten. You can't walk across a rainy London for 2 hours in order to get a gingerbread cake. That's very off. Something's off. So I even, again, it was starting to really become truth. And I shared earlier, I got home and I was in this phase of my last kid preparing and signing the papers for college to leave. And it was that, like you said, a moment of grace. It was one of those moments where God said, Kirsten, this is your chapter. What are you now going to do for your health and wellness? Are you willing to try? And so I got that book out and I made a plan, and I just jumped off the bridge and started. And honestly, I mean this. In those first 66 days, I didn't have one single bite of sugar, nothing. And some people do it differently, where they kind of slide back, go forward, slide back, and that's okay too. But for me, you mentioned way earlier in the conversation, there was some fear. There was this fear, if I have something, what will happen? Will I be back in the depths where I was? Will I have to start over again? And I know how hard starting over is. And so I felt a lot of fear for a long time. But as I mentioned, when I just kept doing it and putting 1 month down and 2 months down, by the time I reached 5 or 6 months, I felt secure that I wasn't going back to the old way. It still took me some time for full acceptance and to not be sad when you saw the cupcake table and all the feelings. It took me a little while, and they're not gone. I'm at 1.5 years. Every once in a while, I have a feeling. I might be at somewhere where it's kind of fun that everybody's doing something, and I'm not going to do that. But I think that's just acknowledging that would be fun, but I'm not going to do that today because I don't want to go back to where I once was. I'm not willing to go back.
So we're talking a lot about the food. And I always say, if we just break up with sugar, that's a diet, right? Because I think what you were referring to is, if you want to know why you're eating too much sugar, stop eating too much sugar, and you'll know why really quickly, right? Because that's like, so a lot of the journey, and I think I see this in all, is about learning how to live life. So where like, talk me through that in your experience of this. Like, what did you find more challenging about breaking up with sugar, and less in the life piece, not necessarily in the food piece? Like, what did you have to learn how to do?
Well, one of the big things that I didn't realize would be so difficult is all of my habits, traditions, things that I do day to day were all intertwined with sugar. And I didn't realize how deeply that went until I started trying to unravel. So we can of course all talk about Christmas, and everybody would feel that way about their traditions and the things they've always done. So that's a lifetime of things I had. So the first Christmas you go through, you think, how will I possibly be able to do this life without, doing this, and this during Christmas season? But even during regular life, like Molly, when I run to Nordstrom to do an errand, I always get a Nordy's bar. It sounds silly, but that's part of my routine. I've done that for 25 years.
Wait, can I just ask?
Very strange.
What is a Nordy's bar? Like, I just need to ask, what's a Nordy's? I mean, The
It's a good
compulsive
question.
overeater in me is just like very curious about what a Nordy's bar. It's not really relevant, but I think everybody's wondering, should I have one?
But
What
it's
is it?
fun. It's fun. Ex- and you shouldn't have one if you're not
No,
doing sugar. If you
right.
are doing sugar, it is a 7-layer bar of like the coconut and the chips and the graham
Oh,
crust.
yeah,
And
we should
they
stop
just do
here.
it
We should
well.
stop
They
here. Yeah,
really
yeah. I mean, I'm
stop
into it
there.
already. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Exactly. Stop.
So I get it.
So each place I would go, each city, for example, Dylan's Candy Bar in New York City, or I mean, I'm just throwing out things. The best bakery in London, as I just mentioned.
Yeah, no, your life
Wherever
was
I
really
go,
entwined.
Savannah, yeah,
Yeah, it sounds like your
it
life was
was,
really
and that's
entwined.
it was. And it was about my joy and my fun and my excitement. It was always kind of the center of it, and I didn't realize how deeply that went. So I'd say that was the most difficult thing, still ongoing, because let's say I go to a new city that I haven't been to in 10 years, I'm going to want to go. I think that's just an ongoing process of creating new fun traditions and new, I love meeting my girlfriends for lunch. Like you said earlier, now it's just a breaking up a sugar lunch. No big deal. If they're having a dessert, that's how I would answer the other part of the question. That's been easier for me than I ever could have realized. I wouldn't have believed you if you told me. I can be anywhere now. It's okay. My daughter used to say that to me years ago, and I'd be like, "Oh, honey, sorry, we're all eating." And she'd be like, "Mom, it's fine." And that's how I am today. I'm here to tell the tale. No one in my life, including myself, thought I could break up with sugar. There isn't anyone, including me, that thought this was possible. It's nothing short of a miracle. And I'm about to have a 4th of July gathering, and there will be an entire table of treats and sweets, and it will be fine.
Yeah,
I'm
but
not even
walk us
worried
through
about it
that.
because
Yeah, but walk us through that. I mean,
I
I
know,
think you
I
have to
know.
explain to us how that goes for you. Cause I think somebody
Yes,
listening would be like, I always bring my 325-pound self. And all she ever says when people say things like this is like, well, good for you, Kirsten. Good for you. That's impossible for
I
me. Do you
know.
have an idea of like
Mhm.
how you I love this thing you're saying about joy. And I
How I
actually
got
really want to
there.
know how do you get
Mhm.
there and without resentment and
Mhm.
without it feeling like a diet? I think that's the real
I
question.
know.
And without
Mhm.
it feeling like deprivation.
Um, And I think it's a really good question. And honestly, I've struggled through this. So I don't want to sound like this has been an easy journey to get to this place, because the struggle was, again, the word grief, which you use in the book, and the stages of grief. I'll just tell you my personal journey was I felt embarrassed to be grieving sugar. It felt shameful when people are grieving real things. And what I've come to understand, as I mentioned earlier, is I'm grieving this because this is a loss of something in my life. Thankfully, it's not a person I love, but it's something I loved that had a lot to do with everything I did, said, anywhere I went. It was a part of everything, and I had to let it go. So I went through, I can't tell you the journals I have written about the 5 stages of grief. First, you're denying I don't have a problem. I'm not an addict. I did that for a long time. I'm not addicted. Even when I was doing breaking up with sugar, I want everyone to know I was saying I am not an addict. I am glad I'm doing this program, but I am not an addict. And so the more I learned about this, what addiction is, what it feels like for people, sharing people's stories and listening to theirs and hearing the similarities. So that's step one. And then, there's 5 stages of grief, but getting to acceptance is hard. And, there are days, as I mentioned earlier, I would say full acceptance is a little bit further than it is on a Tuesday than it might be on a Saturday, depending where my head is that day. But what happens is time, just
Mm.
like any loss in your life, whether it's a terrible loss of a loved one or something as silly in my original thought process as giving up sugar, it takes time. And so I had to give it. My sister says this sentence that I love: you have to honor it with the time it deserves. And we say that about anything. Time heals. So as time went on, it became less of a big deal. So let's say you go to 6 girlfriend lunches and you manage fine. All of a sudden you're like, I think I'm getting this down. And the first 3 were kind of hard because they ordered a dessert and you had to sit there. And one thing I did that isn't for everyone, the first 3 to 4 months, I got a cup of fruit and I put it in front of me. Every time someone had a giant, delicious dessert of my favorite kind, or a big cookie, or I had a cup of fruit, or I brought something with me that was acceptable. And then I felt like I had something. Now, I don't need to do that anymore because, again, practice makes perfect. Now, if I'm hungry for something, I'll get something.
Yeah.
And if I'm not, I won't. And,
I love
would
that.
I sometimes like to stick my face in the dessert? Yeah, but it's okay.
Yeah,
I'm
but when I
choosing not
want
to have
to,
that
and when I
because
want to stick my face in the dessert, I have to say, I'm usually having a feeling. It's not real. Do you know what I mean? I'm usually
it
sad or
is.
jealous or
It is.
scared. Like
Hmm.
it's not really
Hmm.
about the ice cream. I want to tell a quick story about
It's
you.
not. And
No, I just
yes,
want to tell a quick story.
please do.
I'm very touched by, I find it very true what you're saying. It's like, and diet culture has made us the most impatient people around, right? Because
Hmm.
when you're sitting here being
Right.
like, well, here's how I got it better. A lot of repetition, a lot of practice, a lot of esteemable acts that made me not
Hmm.
hate myself, that made me trust myself.
Right.
Like, and then someone's like, well,
Hmm.
what about 30 pounds in 30 days? Like, we're like, that cell's not so good. But I love this. I don't know if I remember. So you come to my monthly coaching sessions, and I remember there's this
Yes.
monthly coaching session, and there was like 5 minutes, there's like 2 minutes left. And you said this thing like, hey,
Yes.
like, I'm having like a really hard time with going to parties right now and not feeling resentful. And you say this whole
Yes.
story, and there's like 2 minutes left. And and I
Hmm.
know you, and I say, hey,
Yes. I remember that.
can we come back to
Can
this
we?
next month? And you
Hmm.
say, or maybe it was next week.
Yes.
Um, and you say, totally. This is the story, you guys. This is the whole story. Okay. So then we get back to coaching. It's like on my head because I feel so bad. Like, oh, I didn't get to Kirsten's scene. And then we get back to the next week of coaching. And I say, Kirsten, you're top of the list. Let's talk about parties. You go, no, I'm fine now. It passed. Do you remember that?
It's, I remember, I do. And it's so true. It was a feeling.
It's
It was a
life.
feeling and it
Right.
passed.
Right.
It's
And it's like,
life.
it was kind of
And
so divine
something
in
new
it.
was on my mind.
Yeah. You're like, yeah, no, I'm fine now.
It's
I love
so
parties.
true.
And it's just such like,
Exactly. And again, yes, people keep asking me things like this. Aren't you going to ever have a piece of cake at your daughter's wedding? Like that's one of the big questions I get a lot. And here's the answer to that. I could if I chose to.
Mhm.
I'm like you, Molly. Nobody's telling me forever or no or any of that, or else I get resentful and frustrated.
Oh yeah.
So I would just challenge anyone who's feeling like this, oh, it sounds like it's really easy for her. It's not, it's just a daily choice. And right now, this is where I am. And I have a feeling I'm going to be doing this for a really long time because I like the fact that my mind is quiet and I'm not spending so much energy circling around on what's okay to have. And should I have this? And all that's gone. And I'm thankful for that.
Mhm.
But there is, I mean, at the beginning, it's important to acknowledge that it feels uncomfortable. That's the word I would use. You're
Mhm.
uncomfortable a lot. You know why? You're making changes.
Sure.
You're at places you used to be doing it differently, and that's uncomfortable. And so we have to sit with those feelings, like you said, and said, why is this so uncomfortable? Why aren't I good just with the conversation or the visit to this new city? Or you mentioned joy earlier. I'm really focused this second year in my breaking up with sugar, of just finding the joy in everything I'm doing. Like if I go to a party, who do I get to see that I haven't seen in a long time? All the things. But I'm like you, Molly. People used to tell me all these same things, and I thought they were crazy. I was like, you guys, that's easy for you to say. That's not how it is for me. And all of a sudden, I've realized you kind of have to get over that initial difficult period to be able to breathe and listen to your wise mind. My husband used to sit and say, oh, these blueberries taste like candy. They're so
Right. Just
amazing.
wants like, be like,
And it
oh,
just used to
enough
make
of
me
you.
angry.
Right. Enough of you with your blue.
Enough.
I'm that person now. I'm like,
Come on.
this banana is so sweet. And I like want to punch myself. Do
That
you know what I mean? A little bit like, oh God,
I
but it's so true.
know. Me too. It's a Georgia peach in the summer, like it's
Right.
dripping, it's delicious. And I think I am now that annoying person that I used to be like, oh, come on,
I
that
know.
is
And I'm
not
kind of
candy. You
into
obviously
her.
haven't tried
Right. And I'm kind of
candy.
into her. Like,
I'm
mm,
kind of into her.
yeah.
Yes. Yes. There's joy. Yeah. So, is it easy? I remember Molly early in our coaching sessions with some of the other people talking a lot about hard, and you helped me so much reframe that word. Everybody at the beginning, I think that word's on your mind. It's hard. It's hard. It's so hard. You can do hard things. It's really hard. And I've reframed that completely because hard, the more times I say it to myself, makes me feel like This is challenging. This is difficult. But if you change that to, this is different. This is
Ooh,
interesting. Let me take a
ooh,
look at what's happening here. Right.
ooh.
Interesting. Like, what's going on here? How,
So into this.
I mean,
Oh, that's a
when I get to
reframe and a
visit New York
half.
City again, I have yes, it is. I want to do new things. Maybe I won't go to Dylan's Candy Bar, but maybe I'll try somewhere new I haven't been before. So
Yeah.
again, it's reframing. Don't keep saying how hard it is, although I did for a while. I want everyone to know that. I did. I said, this is hard. I can do hard things, you know?
Yeah. And I have to say, and I love that you kind of brought this up in the beginning. Listen, I think we're up against diet culture as much as we're up against sugar, right? So I think diet culture
Yes.
is like gets its rocks and its cash off of, yeah, it's hard, you
Mhm.
failed, come try again, there's something wrong with
Yes.
you, so I don't think
Yes.
I don't think you made that up. And it just sounds like you've healed a relationship with yourself so beautifully. And I happen to know that to be true. Here's my closing question.
Well, thank you.
What
Okay.
have you learned in this process of breaking up with sugar that you didn't realize you were good? Like, what is any like added silver lining to this whole thing?
Yes, you mentioned this earlier. I'm trying to remember if you don't mind me looking.
Oh no, we can edit everything out.
I was going to say, I'm glad to hear that because I didn't want to forget. Oh, this is a good one. Yes. So this is what I've learned. I've learned that life can be sweet without sugar. That is my truth that I've learned. Because honestly, Molly, I did not believe that. When I started this, all I could think was, it's not going to be sweet. It's not going to have sprinkles on top. It's not going to be fun and exciting and joyous and all the things that I believed that cupcakes and ice cream and summertime on the boardwalk, all the things from my whole life, 53 years of building up what sugar was. I didn't believe life could be sweet.
Hmm.
And I even tried to envision, like, well, what would be sweet and what could I possibly do without sugar that would even be enjoyable? It was that bad at the beginning because it was so ingrained in my life. And what I've learned is life is sweet, and all the things I was enjoying with the sweets are all the things I'm enjoying now without the sweets. I just wasn't able to see them as clearly and recognize them as those are the things I'm grateful for. Those are the things I'm grateful for. I'm grateful for walking on the beach and watching my kids grow up and visiting my parents, all the things. We all have our own lists of gratitude that we just need to remind ourselves of every day. And a cupcake is not going to change that moment.
Hmm.
It might taste good for a millisecond, but that's really all I've learned to understand that it is. And once I got past the addiction part of it and could see clearly, this is the thing that I've learned that I'm so grateful for. So thank you for that.
Any regrets about breaking up with sugar? I know I said that was my last question, but you know me. I always got a little bit more.
No, it's okay. No regrets. Like I mentioned before, I do have a few hard moments here and there. I don't want to act like this is just easy peasy and no problem ever.
Wait, can I
There are
just hold you on
certainly
that
some
though?
moments where
But hold on,
yes,
hold on.
of
So
course.
every relationship that I'm in, my job, my friend,
Yes.
any relationship that I'm in has hard moments. I
Hmm.
mean, that's the con of it all,
Right.
right?
A relationship, that is the con of it all. And that was really good. I've never heard my relationship with food called a relationship. That's another thing. One thing I wish is that a lot of the therapists and nutritionists and things, I hope that this trend moving forward will help all of them who are kind, wonderful people trying to help their clients to learn sometimes it is addiction. It isn't always addiction, but sometimes it is. And when it is, it has to be treated in a different manner. And I'm so thankful I understand that now.
I mean, I'm so happy. I'm so happy about so many things. I'm so happy we got to have this date. And I'm so happy that your
Me
life has
too.
changed so beautifully. I mean, you found your solution and it sounds like you're guarding it with your life, which, I'm with you on that one.
I am.
So thank you so much
I
for
know. And Molly, I
coming.
just want to thank you.
Oh,
Thank you. Appreciate it.
it's a privilege to get to be a part of your power circle, my friend. It is an absolute privilege. And thank you. I just want to say, we have people on the show that are, podcast experts they had 3 podcasts in the week, and this is such a brave and beautiful thing you've done in the service of helping others. And I know it wasn't easy. And I thank you so much for sharing your story. I hope it helps so many people today.
Well, thank you, Molly. I appreciate you having me. It was
Love
really great
you.
to be here.
Thanks, babe.